Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another Sega Dinosaur King figure. This time we're going to go ahead and check out a sauropod, which I don't think I've taken a look at any of their sauropods previously, as we've got the Amargasaurus, and this one should be a pretty fun one to take a look at, though I will say there's not much in the way of color on this one, surprisingly. I would kind of expect a little bit more because the Dinosaur King figures usually have pretty decent paint apps, not great, but they're usually kind of fun, like the patterning and stuff is usually okay. This one is kind of lacking in that department, but overall it is still an Amargasaurus figure that was out for quite some time, so that's pretty cool because again, you don't get too many Amargasaurus figures. I mean, nowadays we get a good bit, but back then you really didn't, so it's pretty fun to have one from, especially one that actually features articulation, but it's pretty fun to have one from the Dinosaur King line. So as always, let's go ahead and jump straight to a closer look at this and we'll check it out from there. So starting up here at the head sculpt of the Amargasaurus, you can see it looks okay. You know, we don't have the best face here for our dinosaur, but it looks alright. The mouth is like slightly open, so you can kind of see the teeth in there, but they're not super obvious, just enough that we can see them. You can see that the skin texture looks okay here on the face, and you can also see the eye sports some white and bluish tones, though it's not really the most obvious paintwork, and it's hard to tell if there's an actual pupil or anything there going on for the eye. I'm not really sure exactly what they were going for with the eye. I don't know if it was supposed to be a white and then the blue in like the center. It's just kind of all meshed together there. As you lead back into the neck of the Amargasaurus, of course you've got those classic spines here on the back of the dinosaur. They are painted with kind of like the yellowish orange tone that we have for the primary body, and then striped through with a red that we have kind of following along the back of the dinosaur, and you see that red also following along right here as you move down through the course of the neck. Looks like that was a separate piece that was applied because you can see the very obvious seam that runs through that entire area right there. The skin texture isn't really that great. There's not much, honestly, in the way of skin texture moving down, and as you lead to the underside of the dinosaur, it's kind of muted. Like you could see some slight creasing, but there's just not that much, and what is present doesn't really look all that great. We do continue to still have that reddish tone following along the back of the dinosaur. You can see it follow along the spinal column, and it stripes down as you lead through, and that's pretty cool looking. I definitely like that visual. I think it would have been cool to actually have the red kind of lead down into the body a little bit even, but unfortunately it does only stripe down along the back. Moving down into the body of our sauropod, though, the skin texture gets a whole lot nicer looking. You can see the scale detail and everything looks pretty impressive as you lead down. The brighter tones of the body with this like yellowish coloration that we have going on doesn't show it off too well, but you can very clearly see when we get close that, you know, sculpt and detail does look pretty good. You can kind of make out the shoulder blade there as well. As you move down into the front leg, you've got a decently sculpted leg. Clearly not the best sculpted, you know, Amargasaurus leg or foot sculpt that we'll ever see, but when it comes to how it was portrayed in the show, I would think it looks fairly similar. Again, I've never really watched it, so I can't say for sure. I've seen like the entrance video and everything for it, but that's really about it. I definitely want to watch it at some point soon just to kind of get a feel for how the show was. I'll have to try to work on that. But as you lead down, you can see the toes are sculpted out pretty decently, and you can see the nails are painted with a light tone. The side nail there even has a little bit of a gloss coat to it, which you can kind of see right there in this one. Definitely a little bit of a shine. We do actually have articulation for the leg here, which you can see kind of is on a swivel, so it sort of like moves forward and back and would definitely allow you to pose it a little bit, but it's going to kind of look a little awkward, I think. As you move back into the rear part of the stomach, you can see a little bit when it comes to some skin folds and wrinkles and stuff right there. A little beefiness to the stomach region of our Amargasaurus. And you're going to see some scuffs of the paint and stuff throughout because none of my Dinosaur King figures are in perfect condition. They're all used, and they're not the easiest figures to get a hold of, so I've come to terms with not having pristine versions of these figures, but at least I have them, I guess. As you move down here into the thigh, you can see some decent looking muscle definition. The skin texture again continues to look quite nice. We do have more articulation right here, just forward and back. Can't really do anything else when it comes to the articulation at all. As you move down, you can see the knee right there. Again, the calf muscle kind of bulging right there, looking pretty much as it should. You've got the toes sculpted again, and the nails again painted with that light tone, just like we saw on the front leg. And then as you lead up here, you lead out. It looks like we would have articulation in the tail, but that's just where it's connected. We don't actually have any articulation. The reddish tone continues to follow along here on the spinal column and striping down, but as you can see, it does end as you start to lead out into the tail, and then you basically just have the kind of like yellowish orange tone that we have for the primary body color the rest of the way out. The skin texture, it looks okay here, but it doesn't look as nice as you see in the body. It's kind of similar to the neck, where it's a little muted in certain areas, but not that great. And there's definitely not a good amount of length to the tail. It certainly could have used a little bit more length. It is flexible though, so that's a plus. When it comes to a playability standpoint, like, it would definitely be a decently flexible, fun tail to play with. As you lead along the underside, you can see the detail is not really there. There's just not really a whole lot. It's kind of smoothed out for the most part. And then as we turn the figure around, for the most part, you're really going to see the same thing. Not really much in the way of difference from one side to the other when it comes to this, outside, of course, the tail curving away from us. But it's certainly not the best Amargasaurus figure that's out there on the market, but considering it's a Dinosaur King version, I think he's pretty fun. As far as the size goes, for an Amargasaurus, it's a little on the smaller side, lengthwise about 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters. And then for a height to the top of the spines here, you are looking at a little over 3 3/4 inches, heading toward 4 inches, but not quite, or again, just a little under 10 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect A human being next to our Dinosaur King, Amargasaurus. And you can see, as I said, it's fairly small. None of these Dinosaur King figures seem to like size up correctly next to each other. They're always like kind of all over the place when it comes to a size. Actual scale range, but obviously you can see it's not huge, but it's not small. For another comparison, we have a Mattel Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus stepping in next to our Amargasaurus to further give you an idea of the size. And then if you want to see a pretty impressive comparison here, we've got the Mattel Amargasaurus next to the Dinosaur King version. So very clearly you can see why I think this is a smaller version of an Amargasaurus. Compared to most other versions of this dinosaur that you'll find, this one's definitely on the smaller side. Unless, of course, if you bring in the Takara Tomy version of the Amargasaurus, you can see that the Dinosaur King version does finally get a victory here. And then for one final comparison, we have a different Dinosaur King figure. This is the Megaraptor. It's a figure that I've used for a few comparisons now with Dinosaur King figures. And very clearly you can see that these figures are not accurately sized with each other, showing that this Amargasaurus is actually a little bit smaller than our Megaraptor. So this Sega Dinosaur King Amargasaurus is pretty fun, but it's probably one of the few figures I would say isn't really that great. Like, the sculpt is fairly decent. The face looks okay, the neck's a little bit muted, but as you lead into the body, I think it looks a whole lot nicer. The paintwork for this one, though, does not do the figure any favors. It just doesn't shine the way I would expect it to shine. You know, it doesn't show off how nice the detail in the body is because the color's just so bright. It's almost hard to really notice the detailing of the figure, and that is a little bit sad, I think, because it does feature some fairly decent skin texture in the body itself. Just the neck's, and actually the tail is a little bit muted. But the sculpt looks okay. The paintwork, like I said, not really that great. The coloration, obviously they want to replicate the way it looks in the shows, so I get it, but it's just, even, when it comes to creating the Amargasaurus for the show, I feel like they could have come up with a better color scheme than what this one has. And the tones of color are very, in my opinion, not realistic, and even just less flashy than you usually see for these figures. They usually have kind of decent paint applications, whereas this one is just very lackluster, almost looks naked. It almost doesn't look like it has much in the way of paintwork at all. It does feature some articulation, though. The articulated legs in the front aren't really that great because they articulate in a goofy sort of a way where it's hard to make it look natural if it's trying to walk. The rear legs are a bit better. They definitely have a nicer, more smoother articulation style to it. But overall, it's definitely not the best Amargasaurus out there, but when it comes to a Dinosaur King version, I guess he's kind of fun. If you are interested in grabbing one for yourself, as usual, if you want one of these, they are discontinued, so you would have to find it on eBay, and that can get pricey, so good luck trying to find one. Hopefully you can, and of course, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.